What is the greatest movie of all time?
According to IMDb users, the best film of all time is 1994's The Shawshank Redemption. The movie stars Tim Robbins, Morgan...
Nope. Nope. We are not doing that. Okay, enough of that. So, today's video is about dynamic becoming films and static being films. If you're a regular on this channel, you will note that I use this distinction like all of the time. And I wanted to make this video to make sure that I properly have expressed myself on this distinction. I use it an awful lot, so I should make a video specifically designed to help explain what I mean when I keep saying these crazy things. So dynamic becoming films and static being films, first and foremost, one is not better than the other, even though there seems to be positives and negatives applied to one or the other. One is not better than the other. A dynamic becoming film is not better than a static being one. And where I originally got this concept was a while ago, actually. I was studying Kabbalah. I am Jewish, and I was studying Jewish mysticism. I was reading a book by Daniel C. Matt, who rather recently translated the Zohar. And if you know anything about Kabbalah, Merkaba, or Jewish mysticisms, is quite an undertaking. And in the introduction to one of his books, he had a line about the Jewish concept or ideation of God, in which he says, God is not a static being, but rather a dynamic becoming. And I've applied that line really struck me, and I've applied that to several different areas of my life, but I never used it as a lens for film criticism until I read, much later on, an interview with Sofia Coppola, who is one of my most favorite and cherished filmmakers of all time. Her movies and her work and her style means an awful lot to me. She has a quote that was, all of my films are dynamic becomings. And that made the two click with me, and I decided to use it as a lens. And I've realized that most every filmmaker and most every film falls into two camps: dynamic becomings and static beings. So static being films, these are films with objective purposes. These are films that do not change dynamically over time. These are films that have very clear and deliberate points. Some of the very best static being filmmakers are the likes of Alfred Hitchcock, Stanley Kubrick, Fritz Lang. Fritz Lang is probably the archetypal static being filmmaker for me. For instance, there is a wrong way to view M. If you watch M, Fritz Lang's 1931 masterwork, at different points in your life, and you pull different meanings from it or figure out different things about it, that means that you didn't fully understand it the first time you watched it. There are very clear and deliberate intentions behind that film. The composition is so complete, so autocratic, so absolute. These are kind of absolutist filmmakers when it comes to composition. There are objective and clear goals in them. You just have to take the time to figure them out analytically, to break down the film, anatomy of a scene, and figure out exactly what they were trying to tell you through filmic mathematics or through very precise and hyper-specific stylistic practices. There is no wrong way to view Andrei Tarkovsky's 1979 film Stalker. There is no wrong way to view that film. That film is all about intuition. It's all about hyper-specific intuition and guided meditation, right? On the other hand, there is absolutely an incorrect way to view Stanley Kubrick's 1971 opus, A Clockwork Orange. You can be influenced by it. You can be inspired by Alex DeLarge and his droogs. The fascist overtones could completely go over your head, and you can just look at it as a story of coming-of-age rebellion. And that would be a completely incorrect way to view it. Whereas something like a Tarkovsky film is about expressing or conveying abstractions through abstracted compositional methods. So, dynamic becoming filmmakers, we've mentioned Andrei Tarkovsky, we've mentioned Sofia Coppola. There's also Terrence Malick, Jean Vigo, Charlie Chaplin, Pedro Almodovar, Gus Van Sant at his best, Michael Mann at his most meditative. These are very interesting filmmakers, Federico Fellini as well. Dynamic becoming films change over time, change as you grow naturally. They work behind the scenes in your unconscious or subconscious, and they work with your ever-expanding human condition and your ever-expanding understanding of life. It's not that they don't have a purpose or a meaning. For instance, Lost in Translation by Sofia Coppola is a film that is trying desperately to tell you that you are not hopeless. But the way that she conveys that very humanist idea is through almost guided meditations, through abstractions, through letting certain things speak for themselves. Terrence Malick is a very, very good example of this. Think of Days of Heaven with the cornrows, or Thin Red Line's even better. The bodies of water, the ocean off the back of that ship that all the soldiers are on. Malick spends quite a bit of time there, and he guides you through some sorts of meditations with overhanging trees, with an ever-changing kind of kaleidoscopic voiceover motif. And he's guiding you through something, but he's not trying to express something Heideggerian or even hyper-specific in those moments. He's trying to express something ineffable. He's trying to make that body of water start to speak, and then eventually it will start speaking directly to you. Dynamic becoming films are much more personalized, whereas what that body of water will say to me is completely hyper-intimate and hyper-intense and mine alone. Stalker is a film that deals with the concept of struggling with faith and struggling with miracles, that makes you accept the miraculous, makes you accept magic. Through intuition, through guided meditation, through abstractions. Whereas static being films, and there's nothing wrong with a static being film, it's just, they do not change. There is a meaning to 2001. There is a meaning to Vertigo. You just have to sit there and spend a lot of time with it and figure out exactly what Hitchcock or Kubrick were really trying to tell you, really trying to convey, and meet them at their own level of intellect and fully deconstruct and understand that film. Michael Mann is a great example of one who can do both. I would argue that Heat, films like The Insider, those are static being films, and I love both of those films, but they are closed. They are absolute. There are intuitive moments, of course, you'll get that with every Michael Mann film, but Heat is absolute. It has a very clear and deliberate message to convey about the human condition within modern justice, about the crime genre itself, about the concepts of good and evil. It's quite a huge American epic, and it's a masterpiece. Then you get films like Manhunter, Thief, Miami Vice, Public Enemies, that are mostly dynamic becoming, that are almost all about intuition. Think about Miami Vice, the way he films foggy skylines, the way he films bodies of water. There's no possible way he had something incredibly deliberate to express to you during those scenes. He had moods to convey. He had a mood to convey that not only could translate the more emotional parts of the films, but can translate you into a whole new emotionality that he kind of wants to guide you through. He doesn't want to guide you through something incredibly particular. He wants to guide you through a landscape of your emotionality that maybe you haven't touched on in such a long time. And in that way, dynamic becoming films can dynamically move you and help you become something different after you watch the film. I love these kinds of films. Michelangelo Antonioni is another one who rides the line. I would actually put him in static being. He's more about filmic mathematics. You have two characters. One's the beautiful Monica Vitti, and she's the dynamic becoming of all of his films. She's magic on screen, and you cannot guess what magic will do. You cannot properly predict that. But if you have two characters standing there, and there's an inactive volcano in the background, and a cloudy sky up above, that is not intuition, that is filmic mathematics. You have to add all those different components together and go, oh, there's about to be a tryst here, there's about to be some sort of affair, but it's a bad idea because of that dark, dark sky. But the dynamic becoming of those films is the ineffable and quintessential beauty that is Monica Vitti, that was Antonioni's muse. So you can incorporate both distinctions into one and make something truly special. But most films fall into two separate camps. And once again, static being films are wonderful, but there comes a point where you go, oh, I finally just figured out this D.W. Griffith film completely. I finally figured out this Stanley Kubrick film. And where do you go from there? Of course you can watch it again and love it. That's the point of movies, right? But that's it. It's an accomplishment. That's great. That's wonderful. Dynamic becoming films, on the other hand, you need to watch at different points in your life. And if you don't intuit or pull different things, threads of meaning from them, then they become failures. Because they were composed intentionally to change as you change naturally, or potentially as well, as a human being, to your maximum emotional potential. Or else they become failures. Films like Lost in Translation, films like Stalker, films like The Thin Red Line, or La Talente should change over time. You should pull different things from them. And that's the primary difference between these two types of films. And this is a really good lens for me to look through, and it's really fun comparing the two together. Static Being films normally have something very, very, very deliberate to express to you. And these filmmakers are auteurs. These filmmakers are incredibly gifted, incredibly talented. But if they lack anything, it's some sort of confidence, some sort of emotionality, having the confidence in your viewers to intuit the meanings for themselves or to take away something from it that maybe you hadn't originally intended with your compositions, that maybe you hadn't originally planned for. It's about being open. It's about being a lot more open. Dynamic becoming filmmakers, that has to be first and foremost what they're all about. They want to be vulnerable with you in order to make you vulnerable. I love dynamic becoming films. This might be an advertisement of my own bias, or of what I normally want out of a film, but this is the way that it is. Even Karin Kusama, who I've been covering quite a bit on the channel recently, she's a dynamic becoming filmmaker who has completely blown my mind. She also treads the line every once in a while. Destroyer 2018 is definitely dynamic becoming. It's super meditative, super intuitive, hyper intense, through a fiery LA landscape of the woman destroyed, of her destroyed soul, and it's fiery and it's beautiful and it's glowing and it's meditative, intuitive, and guided. And the invitation treads that line between static being and dynamic becoming because, of course, it has culture commentary that is hyper specific to our modern culture, the 2010s, of people who refuse to feel actual pain. So that's the static being component. Also, the isolated structure of the entire thriller is also very static being. But what is dynamically becoming about the entire film, The Invitation, is that it's going to move. It's going to move you, because although what it's saying is hyper-specific to an era, to a very specific generation, it touches on other concepts as well. And it touches on hyper-poetic realism too, because it focuses in on Will's own kind of atomic bomb that's about to explode. And when she does that, it's guided, and it's intuitive, and it's incredibly well framed. It's an experiment with forms and compositions, and trying to tell you something abstract in the moment in a very abstracted way so that she could focus on something that is very deliberately framed like a static being. And that's why The Invitation is my favorite film ever made, because it treads in both waters simultaneously. It's both real and unreal. You know, it's both of this world and infinitely beyond. And I don't know, I really like this distinction, and I really hope that I have articulated myself well, because this is very important to understand moving forward on the channel, because I'm sure I will talk about this kind of stuff in future videos. It's one of the primary lenses that I look through when understanding a film. Because you have to figure out whether or not a film is dynamic becoming or static being in order to properly analyze it, because there's no wrong way to view a dynamic becoming film, but there is an absolutely incorrect way to view a static being film, and you have to be aware, or at least conscious, of what kind of filmmaker you are attempting to interpret. You know? If I tell you how I felt about a Hitchcock film, that really doesn't mean anything. There's nothing of analytical value in there. But if I tell you what Hitchcock meant, that's value. I could do both with Coppola, both with Tarkovsky, both with Malick, both with Van Sant, and that would be the point. That would be the absolute point. I don't know, I don't want to be too rambly in this video, and we're coming up on 15 minutes. What I want you to do is definitely subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. We do a lot of fun things here. It's a pretty interactive and just fun-filled group. We're pretty cool here. Also, like this video, please. YouTube algorithm likes audience interaction. And I like to see my subscriber count grow every once in a while, you know. I just like to be spoiled by maybe one every couple days. So please like the video. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Do Do you make this distinction, or do you think this distinction even exists? Do you think I'm just pulling at threads that aren't there, just like grasping for air? You know what I mean? What do you think of this distinction? Do you think it's helpful, that it's beneficial, or that all films should be viewed in one specific way, or in maybe a far greater amount of ways, a multitude of ways? That's what I believe, and this is just one way to view them. Definitely. And share this video around if anyone's interested in film theory that you might know. And yeah, man, I just really like getting your thoughts in the comments. Thank you guys very much for watching. My name is Zachary Conan. Oh man, it's hot. It's hot. Wearing this hat for my brand, I think. I don't even know why I wear the hat anymore. Oh my god. Who invented hats?
Hat's inventor is a hat.
What? Alright, I got it. My mind's been blown.